and welcome to the 9 News Business Buzz. I'm Ryan Frazier, 9 News business expert. If there's one issue that dictates the long-term economic health of the entire American West, it's the Colorado River. We've learned that the governors of all 7 basin states have been summoned to Washington, D.C. for a meeting with Interior Secretary Doug Burgum. The goal? To break a 2-year impasse. Joining me now to break down the high stakes is Shannon Mullane, Colorado River reporter for the Colorado Sun. Shannon, welcome on the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, Shannon. You know, the governors are being called to the table by the federal government. My producers have reached out to Governor Polis's office. They say he hopes to attend but won't confirm timing. Does this level of federal intervention signal that negotiations have reached a true breaking point, or is Washington applying pressure to avoid years of litigation and uncertainty?
So they told me the same thing. We're still waiting to get a better idea of which Colorado official is going to end up in D.C., if it's Polis or maybe our Colorado River negotiator, Becky Mitchell. But to answer your question, it might be a both and situation depending on who you talk to. Just for a bit of context, these negotiations that we're talking about right now, they have to do with a federal process to decide how to manage the river going forward, the water supply going forward. Historically, for decades now, the federal government has really relied on the local states to agree on how to manage it. So the fact that they've been at an impasse for 2 years now is a pretty big deal. It's a pretty long point of time, and they don't really have that much time left. They have to get this figured out by this fall. So are the negotiations between the states at a breaking point? Maybe. We will see once we know a little bit more about what happens in D.C. But historically, in 2023, the feds have played a similar role. They have intervened to try and encourage the states to come to an agreement when they have disagreed. So we'll just have to see what happens. Yeah.
As you said, water's a big deal, and the old saying here in Colorado, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. You've been all over this at the Colorado Sun in terms of your coverage of the Colorado River and what's happening with these negotiations. What other key insights has your reporting uncovered to date?
Oh my gosh, there are so many things that are happening in the basin. There's so many complex points of discussion. But what I will say when I talk to water experts around the Colorado River Basin, they're frustrated. They're frustrated at the lack of progress. They're frustrated at the lack of transparency. But one thing that is a central sticking point in these negotiations between the states is water cuts. Has to do with what do you do in a dry year? Who's going to cut back, by how much, and when? Just as a reminder, everything's fine in good years. When we have a lot of snow on the mountaintops in Colorado and some other upstream states, we're fine. We're really talking about what happens in dry years, when they happen frequently, and when we're in really dry conditions.
So let's build on that. Now, what is Colorado's red line going into these potential talks? What is Governor Polis fundamentally unwilling to concede, even under federal pressure?
Where I've seen them draw a line for the last 2 years really has to do with this idea of mandatory conservation. The lower basin states have pushed for water cuts to sort of be shared across all 7 basin states, or at least have some sort of set amount of conservation that these 4 upper basin states, which Colorado is one, will contribute. And upper basin states just have said, no, we're not going to do that. And so we'll have to see what happens. But basically, in a year like this one, when we're having dry conditions, this is what they're talking about. Farmers are already likely to have to cut back towards September and August from the water that they should have legally. And so this is a type of year where the upper basin states are saying, you know what, we don't have more water to send down, so we're not going to agree to a mandatory cut.
Now, the Bureau of Reclamation has recently released 5 management alternatives, one of which could take effect even if the states can't agree. Now, if the governors walk away without a deal, does the federal government truly have both the authority and the political will to impose water cuts on Colorado, Utah, and others?
So political will, I'm not sure I can speak to that, but authority, no. The federal government does not have the authority at this point in time to impose cuts on the 4 upper basin states. It works very differently in the lower basin, and that's California, Arizona, and Nevada. In that area, it does have more authority, but up here, not so much. So if the federal government decided, hey, you know what, I want to increase my authority, probably Colorado would sue in that situation. And in some arguments, if it's just for emergency releases from federal reservoirs, the legal case that Colorado could make might be weaker, but if it comes to water cuts, they'd probably really stand up.
Yeah, so clearly it's in
sue.
the interest of everyone to find agreement here to the best extent possible. Otherwise, all the legal uncertainty and just uncertainty in general takes place, which I don't think is a good outcome either. I want to shift, Shannon, the conversation to the economic impacts. This is the business buzz. For Colorado's business community, from agriculture to energy to housing developments, how much does this post-2026 agreement affect long-term water certainty, project financing, investment decisions over the next 10 to 20 years?
To answer you as briefly as possible, I think that uncertainty is going to be part of life in the Colorado River Basin for the next 10 to 20 years for sure. How different industries plan around that is going to be different. When you have a housing development, they might need to choose a site more specifically based around the water supply in the area. They need to prove that they have water supply for decades to come when they set up housing. It could be different for recreation industries. They're impacted by low flows, and recreation industries are really important for western slope economies like where I live in Durango. And then, of course, we've got agriculture, and farmers and ranchers, they have to make crop decisions early in the season. They're running out. They might not make as much money, or they might have to retire their farm early or have a harder time getting into the agricultural business, depending on the water situation. And so the impacts of what happens with the Colorado River really do affect people all across the state. And it also makes competition for water rights higher. Water rights might be valued more highly. I report on this whole negotiation that's been happening with Shoshone on the western slope. That water right is worth $100 million. Wow. And so as the value of a water right gets higher, we also might see greater interest from investment groups, and that's been a concern.
Well, and you said it, whether it be real estate or agriculture and farming or even data centers and how those ultimately use so much water depending on where they're at in the state. The implications are pretty significant for Colorado, Utah, the Upper Basin, as well as the Lower Basin states. Final word, Shannon, as you think about what you're looking for in the weeks ahead, what comes to mind?
We are going to be paying attention around Valentine's Day for any sort of update. We'll be paying attention around the end of this week for an update from the states. We really want to see whether or not they can come to an agreement.
Shannon Mullane, the Colorado River reporter with the Colorado Sun, thank you for joining us. Thank you for all your critical insights and the reporting that you do on this situation. The takeaway, the clock is ticking towards Valentine's Day, and if the states can't find love for a joint agreement, the federal government may force a marriage of convenience that no one really likes. Whether that's legal is for the courts to decide. We'll be back at the 11 o'clock hour with a bipartisan look at Colorado's 2026 legislative priorities. For the 9 News Business Buzz, for Shannon Mullane, I'm Ryan Frazier. See you next time.